My dad was going to send me to therapeutic boarding school because his new wife Lauren said I was having mental health episodes. Then I overheard her on the phone bragging about slipping Benadryl in my drinks and moving my things around to make me look crazy. I recorded everything, and when Dad heard her admit she'd been drugging me to get rid of me, he kicked her out. 6 months later, we saw her at a coffee shop with my chemistry teacher, starting the same game all over again. My dad had been distant for weeks with concerned looks, hushed phone calls, and appointments with specialists I'd never heard of, while his new wife Lauren documented everything I did, always catching me at my worst moments. Finally, Dad cornered me Sunday night saying, "Sweetheart, we need to talk. This isn't working anymore." I set down my homework and asked what he meant. "You're struggling, honey. Lauren's been tracking your episodes, and I'm worried about your mental health." I looked around my room where everything was exactly where I'd left it, because I'd started photographing my space every morning. "Dad, I haven't had any episodes." He pulled out his phone saying, "It's not just today, it's the pattern. Lauren says she's concerned about your stability." That's when Lauren appeared in my doorway like she'd been listening to our conversation. "Sorry, I couldn't help overhearing," she said with fake concern. "Your father's just trying to get you proper help." I felt my chest getting tight. "Proper help? I'm getting straight A's and working part-time." Lauren sighed. "Academic performance doesn't mean you're mentally well. Since when are you qualified to diagnose me?" I asked. Dad stepped between us. "Look, I found a therapeutic boarding school, somewhere structured. You'll start after winter break." I stared at him. "We've lived together since Mom died, just us for 3 years. Are you seriously sending me away because your wife thinks I'm crazy?" "I'm sending you somewhere safe because you're spiraling and it's affecting everyone," Dad said. That night I couldn't sleep because something felt off about this whole situation, since Dad had never questioned my mental health before Lauren moved in 6 months ago. The next morning, Dad left for work and Lauren was still there, which was weird because she had a real estate showing. Around 10 a.m., I heard her on the phone in their bedroom and started recording. I can't wait until she's gone. David has no idea I've been moving her things and staging these incidents. Once she's at boarding school, I'll convince him she needs long-term residential treatment. My blood ran cold as she was manufacturing my instability to get rid of me, but it got worse. The best part is I've been slipping Benadryl in her drinks, making her groggy and confused. David thinks she's dissociating. I even planted pills in her backpack last week. I kept recording as she laughed about her manipulation. David's so protective. He actually believes his perfect daughter is having a breakdown when it's been me the whole time. That evening, Dad came home to find me sitting at our kitchen table with my laptop open. "Feeling better?" he said carefully. "Dad, sit down. There's something you need to hear." Lauren emerged from their bedroom. "What's going on?" I hit play on the recording, and Dad's face went through about 5 different emotions as he listened to his wife's voice detailing her entire plan to eliminate and institutionalize me. When it finished, the house was dead silent. "David, baby, I can explain," Lauren started. "Get out," Dad said quietly. "What? Get out," he screamed. "Get your stuff and get out of my house right now." Lauren tried to argue, but Dad was already grabbing her things and throwing them in a bag. "You drugged my daughter. You made me think my baby girl was sick." As Dad shoved Lauren toward the door, she turned to me with pure hatred. "This is all your fault. You ruined everything." "No," Dad said. "You tried to steal my daughter from me. We're done." After she left, Dad collapsed on the couch with his head in his hands. "Sweetheart, I'm so sorry. I almost sent you away over her lies. She played us both perfectly," I said. "The confusion, the concerns, turning you against me. It was all calculated." Dad looked up. "How did you figure it out?" "Something didn't add up. You never worried about me before she came along." Dad found pills she'd hidden in my jewelry box, fake incident reports in his office, even a forged diary entry in my handwriting that she'd planned to discover. "I can't believe I fell for this," Dad said. "She's a professional manipulator. This wasn't your fault." 6 months later, Dad and I are closer than ever, and we have a rule that future girlfriends need both our approval. Last week, we saw Lauren at a coffee shop with some new guy, and our jaws dropped, because this wasn't just some new guy. This was one of my teachers. Lauren was back. I froze right there in the coffee shop. Lauren noticed us at the same moment, and her hand moved to touch my teacher's arm in that possessive way I remembered too well. My stomach churned as Mr. Henderson smiled down at her, completely unaware of what he'd gotten himself into. Dad grabbed my elbow and steered me toward the exit. We made it to the car before either of us spoke. He gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles went white. "We need to warn him," I said. Dad shook his head. "He won't believe us. Remember how I didn't believe you?" That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Mr. Henderson taught my AP chemistry class. He was one of those teachers everyone loved because he actually cared about his students. Now Lauren had her claws in him, and I knew exactly what would come next. The following Monday, I walked into chemistry class to find Lauren sitting in the front row. She wore a visitor's badge and held a clipboard, taking notes while Mr. Henderson explained molecular bonds. Her eyes found mine immediately, and she smiled that fake sweet smile I'd learned to hate. "Class, we have a special guest today," Mr. Henderson announced. "My girlfriend Lauren is observing as part of her education psychology research." My classmates murmured their hellos while I sank lower in my seat. Lauren's research was already beginning. Throughout the lesson, I caught her writing furiously whenever I answered a question or moved in my chair. When I asked to use the bathroom, she made another note. By the time class ended, her clipboard was half full. I tried to leave quickly, but Mr. Henderson called me back. "Can you stay a moment? Lauren has some concerns." My heart pounded as my classmates filed out. Lauren stood beside Mr. Henderson's desk, her hand resting on his shoulder. "I noticed some troubling behaviors today," she began, consulting her notes. "Fidgeting, difficulty maintaining eye contact, leaving class unnecessarily." Mr. Henderson frowned. "She asked to use the restroom once." "It's a pattern," Lauren insisted. "I've been researching adolescent psychological disorders, and these are classic warning signs." I clenched my fists. "Warning signs of what exactly?" Lauren's eyes gleamed. "I'm not qualified to diagnose, but I think we should monitor the situation for your own well-being." Mr. Henderson looked uncomfortable. "I haven't noticed anything concerning in my class. Sometimes an outside perspective helps," Lauren said, squeezing his shoulder. "I'm just trying to help." I left that meeting feeling sick. She was starting the same game all over again, but this time using my teacher as her weapon. Over the next 2 weeks, Lauren appeared in more of my classes. She convinced Mr. Henderson that observing my full academic day would provide valuable data. Teachers who'd never questioned my behavior suddenly started asking if I was feeling okay. My English teacher pulled me aside after Lauren observed her class. "Lauren mentioned you seemed distracted today. Is everything all right at home?" I wanted to scream that Lauren was the problem, but I just nodded and said I was fine. Who would believe that my chemistry teacher's girlfriend was stalking me through school. The worst part was watching Mr. Henderson change. He used to joke with students and stay after class to help anyone struggling. Now he watched me constantly, making notes when I shifted in my seat or took too long answering a question. Lauren had poisoned another relationship in my life. One Thursday, I stayed after school to work on a lab project. The science wing was mostly empty when I heard voices from Mr. Henderson's classroom. I crept closer and recognized Lauren's voice. She's getting worse. Today she was practically catatonic during the lecture. She seemed engaged to me, Mr. Henderson replied. She answered several questions correctly. That's just it. She goes from withdrawn to overly eager for attention. It's textbook behavioral instability. I pulled out my phone and started recording, just like before. Maybe we should involve her father, Mr. Henderson suggested. Lauren's voice turned sharp. Number David's too close to see it clearly. He nearly sent her away last time, but she manipulated him into thinking I was the problem. Last time? Oh, I didn't mention? I used to be married to David. We divorced because she turned him against me with lies and manufactured evidence. She's dangerously manipulative. My hands shook as I recorded her twisting our history. She was painting me as the villain in her own sick story. That's concerning, Mr. Henderson said slowly. Should I report this to the administration? Not yet. Let me gather more evidence first. I'm documenting everything for her own protection. I'd heard enough. I hurried away before they could discover me, my mind racing. Lauren wasn't just trying to convince people I was unstable. She was building a case that I was dangerous. That evening, I showed Dad the recording. His face went pale as he listened to Lauren's lies. She's doing it again, he said, but this time she's smarter. She's not coming after you directly through me. She's using the school system, I said. If teachers start reporting concerns, it won't matter what we say. Dad paced our living room. We need to be smarter too. Last time you caught her admitting everything, but she won't make that mistake again. He was right. Lauren had learned from her failure. This time she was creating a paper trail through legitimate channels. Teachers' concerns carried weight. If enough of them reported problems, social services might get involved. What do we do? I asked. Dad sat beside me on the couch. We document everything, just like before. But this time, we need allies. The next day, I approached my guidance counselor, Mrs. Chen. She'd known me since freshman year and had written one of my college recommendation letters. Can I talk to you about something personal? I asked. She welcomed me into her office. I told her everything about Lauren, showing her the old recordings and the new one. Mrs. Chen listened without interrupting, her expression growing more concerned with each detail. This is serious, she said when I finished. Has she made any direct threats? No, she's too smart for that. She's just planting seeds of doubt everywhere. Mrs. Chen made notes. I'll keep an eye on the situation. If any teachers come to me with concerns about you, I'll know the real story. Having one adult on my side helped, but Lauren's campaign continued. She started showing up at my extracurriculars, clipboard in hand. She observed my shift at the local bookstore, telling my manager she was conducting a workplace psychology study. She even appeared at my friend Sarah's house during our study group. Your teacher's girlfriend is super weird, Sarah told me later. She kept asking if you seemed different lately. The pressure was building. Teachers looked at me differently. Friends started asking if I was okay. Lauren was creating the illusion of concern from every direction. 3 weeks into her campaign, I made a mistake. I was exhausted from constantly being watched and documented. During chemistry class, I knocked over a beaker of harmless solution. It shattered on the floor, and I immediately started cleaning it up. Stop, Lauren commanded from her observation post. Nobody move. This could be dangerous. Oh wow, Lauren's really going for the gold medal in most awkward school stalker here, following a teenager around with a clipboard like she's studying wildlife in their natural habitat. I love how she tells the teacher the kid was practically catatonic, and then immediately has to backtrack when he points out she was actually answering questions correctly. Nice save there, Lauren. Real smooth. Mr. Henderson rushed over. It's just diluted sodium chloride, basically salt water. But Lauren was already taking photos of the incident with her phone. Protocol requires documenting any laboratory accidents, she said, for safety records. I knew those photos would be twisted into evidence of my instability and dangerous behavior in class. I was playing right into her hands. That afternoon, Mr. Henderson asked me to stay after class again. This time, Lauren waited outside, giving us privacy while staying close enough to control the narrative. I'm concerned about your focus lately, he began. The beaker incident today, combined with other observations, it was an accident, I said. I knocked it over reaching for my notebook. He sighed. I know, but Lauren thinks the stress might be affecting your coordination and judgment. She suggested you might benefit from reduced course load. My grades are perfect, I protested. One accident doesn't mean I'm falling apart. No one's saying you're falling apart, he said carefully. We just want to support you. I left that meeting feeling trapped. Lauren was tightening the net, and I couldn't see a way out. She'd learned from her mistakes, and this time her plan was working. That night, Dad and I sat at the kitchen table strategizing. We'd filled a notebook with documentation of Lauren's stalking, but it felt like playing defense while she controlled the game. Maybe I should confront her, Dad suggested. Tell her to back off. She'll record it and twist your words, I said. Make it seem like you're harassing her. We both knew I was right. Lauren had positioned herself perfectly, a concerned girlfriend conducting legitimate research, while we looked like the bitter ex-family trying to interfere with her new relationship. There has to be something we can do, Dad said. I stared at our notebook full of evidence. Last time, Lauren's arrogance had been her downfall. She'd bragged about her plan, assuming she'd already won. This time she was careful, but maybe that careful facade was hiding the same arrogance. What if we don't wait for her to mess up? I said slowly. What if we create a situation where she has to show her true colors? Dad leaned forward. What are you thinking? She's built this image of being concerned and professional, but underneath, she's still the same person who drugged me and tried to destroy our family. If we push the right buttons, she might crack, Dad finished. It was risky. If we pushed too hard, we'd look like the aggressors. But if we did nothing, Lauren would slowly poison my entire life until everyone believed her lies. We need to be smart about this, Dad said. One shot to expose her, or she wins. I thought about Mr. Henderson, how he'd changed from the teacher who encouraged everyone to someone who watched me with suspicion. Lauren had taken something good and twisted it into her weapon. Maybe it was time to twist it back. I spent the weekend analyzing Lauren's patterns from both times she'd targeted our family. She always started small, building credibility before escalating. She documented obsessively, creating evidence trails that looked legitimate to outsiders. Most importantly, she relied on people's natural tendency to trust concerned authority figures. Monday morning arrived with a new development. Mrs. Chen pulled me aside before first period, her face serious. She explained that 3 teachers had already submitted informal concern reports about my behavior, all citing Lauren's observations. The administration was considering mandatory counseling sessions. I felt the walls closing in again, but this time I had a plan forming. Lauren's weakness was her need for control, and her belief that she was smarter than everyone else. If I could disrupt her carefully orchestrated narrative, she might reveal herself. During chemistry class, I deliberately answered every question correctly, participated actively, and helped my lab partner with calculations. Lauren scribbled furiously on her clipboard, clearly frustrated by my exemplary performance. Mr. Henderson seemed confused by the disconnect between my behavior and Lauren's reports. After class, I approached Mr. Henderson with a carefully prepared request. I explained that I wanted to do an extra credit project on behavioral psychology, specifically focusing on observer bias in educational settings. His eyes lit up at my academic initiative, though Lauren's expression darkened from across the room. That afternoon, I implemented the next phase. I asked Mrs. Chen to arrange a meeting with all my teachers, explaining that I wanted to address their concerns directly. She agreed, impressed by my mature approach to the situation. The meeting took place Wednesday after school. 6 teachers gathered in the conference room, including Mr. Henderson. Lauren wasn't invited, but I knew she'd hear about it immediately. I came prepared with my grade reports, attendance records, and testimonials from my employer about my work performance. I presented my case methodically, showing consistent academic excellence and positive behavior reports from before Lauren's observations began. Several teachers exchanged glances, beginning to see the pattern. My English teacher admitted she'd only noticed problems after Lauren pointed them out. Mr. Henderson remained silent throughout, his jaw tightening as the evidence mounted. When the meeting ended, most teachers seemed convinced that perhaps they'd been influenced by outside observations, but I knew Lauren wouldn't accept this setback quietly. Sure enough, Thursday brought escalation. I arrived at school to find my locker door slightly ajar. Nothing was missing, but several items had been rearranged. My chemistry notebook was on the wrong shelf, and my calculator was in my jacket pocket instead of my backpack. Subtle changes that only I would notice. During lunch, Sarah mentioned that someone had been asking other students about my behavior. The questions were framed as casual concern, but they planted seeds of doubt. Had I seemed stressed lately? Was I acting differently? Several classmates started watching me with curious expressions. I documented everything in my phone, creating my own evidence trail. Dad did the same at home, noting times when items were mysteriously moved or when he received anonymous, concerned parent emails about my well-being. We were building our case, but Lauren was moving faster. Friday afternoon brought the confrontation I'd been expecting. Mr. Henderson asked me to stay after class, and this time Lauren was already in the room. She sat behind his desk like she belonged there, clipboard in hand and expression sympathetic. Mr. Henderson looked uncomfortable as he began explaining that Lauren had compiled concerning data about my behavior patterns. She'd created graphs showing my erratic class participation, charts documenting my suspicious bathroom breaks, and photos of normal teenage behavior labeled as warning signs. I listened calmly, then pulled out my own folder. Inside were my recordings of Lauren's conversations, documentation of her stalking behavior, and most importantly, a printed email I discovered in the school's public records request. It showed Lauren had tried this exact same pattern at her previous job in another state. Mr. Henderson's face changed as he reviewed the materials. Lauren's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the cold calculation underneath. She quickly recovered, suggesting that I was deflecting from my own issues by attacking her credibility. The tension in the room was suffocating. Mr. Henderson looked between us, clearly torn between his girlfriend and mounting evidence of her deception. I knew this was the crucial moment, but pushing too hard would backfire. Instead, I made a simple request. I asked Mr. Henderson to verify Lauren's credentials and previous employment. I suggested he contact her references independently, not using the numbers she provided. His expression told me he was beginning to have doubts. Lauren's response was swift and vicious. By Monday morning, rumors were circulating about my violent outburst in chemistry class. Students who weren't even present claimed to have witnessed me threatening Lauren. Someone had posted on the school's anonymous gossip page about my mental health crisis. Dad received calls from concerned parents who'd heard their children discussing my dangerous behavior. The school administration scheduled an emergency meeting to discuss my fitness to remain in regular classes. Lauren had shifted tactics from subtle manipulation to full character assassination. I felt like I was drowning in lies, but Mrs. Chen remained steadfast. She'd been documenting the timeline of events and noticed something crucial. Every escalation followed immediately after I'd made progress in exposing Lauren. The pattern was too consistent to be coincidental. Tuesday's emergency meeting included the principal, vice principal, several teachers, and my father. Lauren attended as Mr. Henderson's support person, positioning herself as a concerned observer rather than the architect of the crisis. She'd prepared a presentation complete with charts, graphs, and carefully edited photos. Dad came prepared too. He'd hired a private investigator over the weekend who'd uncovered Lauren's history. 3 previous relationships had ended with similar patterns: the systematic destruction of anyone who threatened her control. 2 ex-husbands had lost custody of their children after being painted as unstable. A stepdaughter in another state had been institutionalized based on Lauren's concerns. The room fell silent as Dad presented the investigator's findings. Lauren's face remained calm, but her knuckles were white as she gripped her clipboard. She tried to dismiss the information as irrelevant to the current situation, but doubt was spreading through the room. Mr. Henderson looked physically ill as he processed the information. He'd been completely taken in by Lauren's performance, just as Dad had been. The principal called for a recess, during which heated discussions could be heard from the hallway. When the meeting resumed, the principal announced that all behavioral concerns about me would be suspended pending a full investigation. Lauren's observational privileges were revoked immediately. She would no longer be allowed on school property without official business. Lauren's composure finally cracked. She accused the school of failing to protect students, threatened legal action, and claimed I'd manipulated everyone just like I'd manipulated my father. Her rant grew increasingly unhinged as she realized her plan was falling apart. Mr. Henderson tried to calm her, but she turned on him too. She accused him of being weak, of choosing a manipulative teenager over her professional judgment. The mask had completely fallen away, revealing the narcissistic rage underneath. Security was called to escort Lauren from the building. As she was let out, she locked eyes with me one last last time. The hatred there was pure and undiluted. I knew this wasn't over. Lauren didn't accept defeat gracefully. The next few days were surreal. Mr. Henderson took personal leave to process what had happened. Students who'd spread rumors apologized, admitting they'd been caught up in the drama. Teachers expressed regret for doubting me, but I couldn't relax because I knew Lauren was still out there, planning her next move. Dad increased security at our house, installing cameras and changing all the locks. We varied our routines and stayed vigilant. The private investigator warned us that Lauren's pattern included extinction bursts, final desperate attempts to regain control when her plans failed. Sure enough, Friday brought chaos. I love how she tried to sit behind Mr. Henderson's desk like she owned the place. Then when her whole scheme fell apart, she basically turned into that kid who flips the board game when they're losing, and calling security to escort her out while she's ranting about manipulative teenagers. I arrived at school to find my car tires slashed in the student parking lot. Security footage mysteriously malfunctioned during the time frame when it happened. Dad's office received anonymous complaints about his parenting. My employer got calls claiming I'd been stealing from the register. Each attack was deniable, impossible to prove Lauren was behind them. She was too smart to leave direct evidence. But the pattern was clear to anyone paying attention. She was trying to make our lives miserable enough that we'd leave town, removing the witnesses to her true nature. Mrs. Chen helped me file reports for each incident, creating an official paper trail. The principal increased security patrols around the school. My employer, who'd known me for 2 years, dismissed the anonymous complaints as obvious harassment. Slowly, Lauren's attacks were being neutralized by the support network we built. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Mr. Henderson returned to school the following Monday, looking haggard but determined. He asked to speak with Dad and me privately after school. In Mrs. Chen's office, he laid out what he'd discovered during his week of reflection. Lauren had been using his computer to access student records, violating numerous privacy laws. She'd created fake social media accounts to spread rumors and had used his school email to send concerned messages to parents. He'd found drafts of letters recommending my immediate psychiatric evaluation, waiting to be sent on his official letterhead. Most damning of all, he'd found her real laptop hidden in his apartment. On it were detailed plans for destroying my family, dating back to before she'd even met him. I was listed as the primary obstacle to her goal of marrying into money and stability. She'd researched Dad extensively, learned about Mom's death, and crafted her approach accordingly. Mr. Henderson had already contacted law enforcement and an attorney. While criminal charges might be difficult to prove, the evidence was sufficient for restraining orders and civil action. He apologized profusely for his role in her scheme, though we assured him he was a victim too. That evening, Lauren made her final move. She appeared at our house despite the security measures, pounding on the door and screaming about injustice. Dad called the police while I recorded everything from my bedroom window. She ranted about how we'd ruined her life, how she'd only wanted to help, how ungrateful we were for her concern. The police arrived quickly, having been briefed on the situation. Lauren tried to charm them at first, playing the concerned ex-wife worried about a troubled teen, but when they asked her to leave, she exploded. She accused them of corruption, threatened lawsuits, and had to be physically restrained when she lunged toward our front door. As the police car drove away with Lauren in the back seat, Dad and I stood in our doorway watching. We were both shaking from adrenaline and relief. The woman who'd nearly destroyed our family twice was finally facing consequences for her actions. The next weeks brought a strange kind of peace. Lauren was charged with harassment, stalking, and making false reports. The restraining orders were granted immediately. Mr. Henderson testified about her use of his position to access student records. Other victims from her past came forward, strengthening the case against her. I returned to being a normal high school student, focusing on my grades and college applications. The drama became old news as other scandals captured people's attention. Some classmates still gave me curious looks, but most had moved on to other interests. Mr. Henderson gradually returned to his old self, joking with students and staying late to help with difficult concepts. He apologized to me privately several times, but I assured him I didn't blame him. Lauren had fooled many intelligent people over the years. He was just her latest victim. Dad and I grew even closer through the ordeal. We'd learned to trust each other's instincts and communicate openly about concerns. He dated occasionally, but always introduced potential partners to me early, watching for any red flags we might have missed before. The legal proceedings dragged on for months, but Lauren eventually accepted a plea deal. She received probation, mandatory counseling, and strict restraining orders keeping her away from our family and Mr. Henderson. It wasn't the dramatic justice we might have wanted, but it was enough to keep her out of our lives. One afternoon, while organizing my college application materials, I found the notebook where I'd documented Lauren's first campaign against me. Reading through it, I was struck by how much I'd grown. The scared teenager who'd almost been sent away had become someone who could recognize manipulation and stand up against it. Dad found me reading and sat down beside me. We talked about the patterns we'd missed the first time, the warning signs we'd ignore in the future. He admitted that loneliness after Mom's death had made him vulnerable to Lauren's initial charm. I understood. We'd both been grieving in our own ways. As senior year progressed, the Lauren saga became just another chapter in our family's story. We'd survived loss, betrayal, and attempted destruction, but we'd also discovered our own strength and the power of truth over manipulation. The experience had taught us valuable lessons about trust, vigilance, and the importance of listening to each other. Mr. Henderson eventually started dating again, this time with someone who had no interest in psychology or student observation. He joked that he'd developed an allergy to clipboards and behavioral charts. The chemistry class atmosphere returned to its previous warmth, with students feeling safe to make mistakes without being psychoanalyzed. I sometimes wondered what drove someone like Lauren to such extremes. The private investigator's report had revealed a pattern going back decades, a trail of destroyed relationships and damaged lives, but understanding her motivations didn't excuse her actions or diminish the harm she'd caused. The restraining order hearing was scheduled for the following week. Dad and I spent hours organizing our evidence, creating a timeline of Lauren's harassment that stretched across 2 separate attempts to destroy our family. Mrs. Chen provided written statements about the school incidents, while Mr. Henderson compiled documentation of Lauren's unauthorized access to student records. 3 days before the hearing, I noticed a car following me home from work. It stayed exactly 2 cars behind, turning wherever I turned. My hands trembled on the steering wheel as I took an unexpected detour through a residential neighborhood. The car continued following. Instead of going home, I drove straight to the police station and parked in their lot. The car sped past without stopping, but I caught a glimpse of the driver. It wasn't Lauren, but I recognized him from her social media photos as her brother. I filed another report, adding it to our growing collection. The officer taking my statement mentioned they'd been getting similar reports from Dad's workplace. Someone had been asking questions about his schedule, pretending to be a client. The harassment was escalating, but now it involved other people doing Lauren's dirty work. That evening, Dad installed a new security system with cameras covering every angle of our property. We changed our routines again, taking different routes and varying our schedules. I started carpooling with Sarah to avoid being alone in parking lots. The constant vigilance was exhausting, but we couldn't let our guard down. The night before the hearing, neither of us slept well. I kept checking the security cameras on my phone, watching for any movement outside. Around 3 a.m., motion sensors triggered an alert. The cameras showed someone in dark clothing approaching our front door. They stood there for several minutes, not moving, just staring at the house. Then they left something on our doorstep and disappeared into the darkness. Dad called the police before either of us went outside. When officers arrived, they found a manila envelope containing printed screenshots of my social media accounts, with certain posts circled in red marker. Normal teenage photos and comments had been annotated with psychological terminology, creating the illusion of concerning behavior patterns. It was Lauren's handwriting. The hearing itself was tense but straightforward. Lauren appeared with an attorney, dressed conservatively and maintaining a calm demeanor. She attempted to paint herself as a concerned educator who'd been misunderstood and vilified for trying to help a troubled teen. Her lawyer argued that the restraining order was unnecessary harassment of an innocent woman. Our attorney presented the evidence methodically. The recordings of Lauren admitting to drugging me, the documentation of her stalking behavior at school, Mr. Henderson's testimony about her accessing student records, the private investigator's report showing her pattern of behavior across multiple states, the recent harassment incidents, including the envelope left that morning. Lauren's composure cracked when the judge asked her directly about the drugging admission. She claimed the recording was taken out of context, that she'd been joking, that I'd edited it to frame her. But when pressed for details, her explanations became increasingly convoluted. Her attorney tried to redirect, but the damage was done. The judge granted the restraining order with strict conditions. Lauren was prohibited from coming within 500 feet of our home, my school, or my workplace. She couldn't contact us directly or through third parties. Any violation would result in immediate arrest. The order also covered Dad's workplace and specifically mentioned that harassment through other people would be considered a violation. As we left the courthouse, I felt a mixture of relief and lingering anxiety. Legal protection was important, but paper couldn't stop someone truly determined to cause harm. Lauren's brother was waiting in the parking lot, taking photos of us with his phone. Our attorney immediately documented this, warning him that his actions could be considered harassment by proxy. The next few weeks brought a deceptive calm. Lauren seemed to have retreated, and life began returning to something resembling normal. I focused on my college applications, writing essays about resilience and the importance of trusting your instincts. Dad started seeing a therapist to process everything that had happened, encouraging me to do the same. Mr. Henderson reached out one afternoon, asking if I'd be comfortable meeting for coffee. He wanted to apologize again and share some information he'd discovered. We met at a busy cafe downtown, both of us scanning the room for familiar faces before settling into a corner booth. He showed me emails he'd found in his account sent folder that he hadn't written. Lauren had been impersonating him, sending messages to other teachers expressing concern about my behavior. She'd created an entire false narrative using his credibility. He'd reported it to the school administration and changed all his passwords, but the violation of trust had shaken him deeply. The conversation helped both of us process what we'd experienced. He admitted feeling foolish for being manipulated so easily. I shared how the experience had changed my perspective on trust and relationships. We agreed that Lauren's ability to exploit people's good intentions was her most dangerous trait. 2 months after the restraining order, I was accepted early decision to my dream college 3 states away. The distance felt like a gift, a chance to start fresh where Lauren's shadow couldn't reach. Lauren trying to convince the judge she was just joking about drugging someone is like saying you accidentally fell into someone's email account and accidentally wrote fake messages pretending to be them, which oh wait, she actually did that too. Dad initially worried about me being so far from home, but we both knew that staying local would mean constantly looking over our shoulders. Spring semester proceeded without major incidents, though we remained vigilant. I caught glimpses of cars that looked like Lauren's brother's vehicle, but they never followed or approached. Hang-up calls came to the house occasionally, always from different numbers. We documented everything but tried not to let it dominate our lives. Graduation day arrived with perfect weather and cautious optimism. Dad hired security for the ceremony after learning that restraining orders were difficult to enforce in large crowds. I scanned the audience during the processional, relieved not to see any familiar threats. The ceremony passed peacefully, and I allowed myself to feel proud of surviving everything and still achieving my goals. The summer before college became about preparation and healing. Dad and I took a road trip to campus, spending quality time together without the constant stress of Lauren's presence. We talked about boundaries, safety protocols, and the importance of trusting new people while remaining aware of red flags. During orientation weekend, I found myself hyper-aware of anyone who seemed too interested in my background or asked probing questions. It took conscious effort to relax and give people chances. My roommate turned out to be wonderfully normal, focused on her pre-med studies and oblivious to my past drama. I settled into college life gradually, building new friendships and excelling in my classes. The distance from home felt liberating, though I called Dad every few days to check in. He mentioned that the hang-up calls had stopped and there'd been no signs of Lauren or her associates. Thanksgiving break brought me home for the first time since August. The house felt different, more peaceful. Dad had redecorated some rooms, removing any traces of Lauren's presence. He seemed lighter too, having processed much of his guilt through therapy. We cooked together, watched movies, and enjoyed the simple pleasure of feeling safe in our own home. On my last night before returning to school, we sat in the living room looking through old photo albums, pictures of Mom, of better times, of the life we'd rebuilt after loss. Dad pointed out how much I'd grown, not just physically, but in strength and wisdom. The scared girl who'd almost been sent away to boarding school had become a confident young woman. Back at college, I threw myself into spring semester with renewed energy. I joined clubs, made Dean's List, and even started dating someone who knew nothing about my past. past. It felt good to be known for who I was becoming, rather than what I'd survived. One evening in April, Dad called with news. Lauren had been arrested in another state for similar harassment charges against a new family. The private investigator had been tracking her movements and alerted authorities when she began targeting a single father with a teenage son. Her pattern was so consistent that prosecutors were building a stronger case using evidence from multiple victims. The news brought complicated emotions: relief that she'd been stopped before destroying another family, anger that it had taken so long for real consequences to catch up with her, sadness for her new victims who'd experienced even a fraction of what we'd endured. But mostly, I felt a sense of closure. Finals week arrived with its usual stress, but it felt manageable compared to everything else I'd faced. I submitted my last paper, packed up my dorm room, and prepared for sophomore year. The girl who'd once documented her belongings out of paranoia was now documenting memories with friends, academic achievements, and plans for the future. Dad picked me up from campus, and we drove home together, windows down and music playing. We didn't talk about Lauren or restraining orders or security cameras. Instead, we discussed my major, his new promotion at work, and our plans for a summer vacation. The past would always be part of our story, but it no longer defined our present. That evening, as we sat on the porch watching fireflies, I realized how far we'd come. The woman who'd tried to tear us apart had ultimately made us stronger. We'd learned to trust our instincts, protect each other, and build a support network that no manipulator could destroy. Most importantly, we'd learned that surviving wasn't just about making it through the crisis, but about choosing to thrive despite it. The security cameras were still there, the restraining order still active, and we'd probably always double-check locks and vary our routines. But these precautions had become background noise rather than the dominant melody of our lives. We'd reclaimed our peace, our home, and our future. Lauren had lost everything in her pursuit of control, while we'd gained wisdom, resilience, and an unbreakable bond. As summer stretched ahead, I felt genuinely optimistic for the first time in years. There would always be challenges and difficult people in the world, but I now knew I could face them. The girl who'd hidden a recorder in her pocket had grown into someone who stood tall, spoke truth, and refused to let anyone dim her light. And that transformation was worth every difficult moment it took to get there. I am Mini Fable Fever. Hope you guys all have an amazing day and see you in the next story.